Welcome to today's IT Time, called Speak to Inspire. Let me start off with asking you a series of questions. And I want you to answer each of them mentally. I'm going to give you around 8 seconds to do that. Ready? Here we go. Number 1. Why is this IT Time titled Speak to Inspire? Number 2. Do you like the sound of your own voice? Number 3. How do you feel in front of an audience? Really imagine that one. And finally, number 4. What do you expect to learn today? All right. Now, you remember I asked you why this IT Time is called Speak to Inspire, and I will answer that one right away. You see, in the past, it was absolutely sufficient to be well educated enough, like get a degree, maybe some certificates, you're pretty much set for life. That's unthinkable nowadays. And we all know that. We have known that for quite a while, quite some time. So nowadays, it's actually getting faster and faster and faster, the rate at which the world is changing, which means it's more important than ever to be very adaptable, to constantly incorporate new knowledge, acquire new skills, and have a way of prioritizing which task to tackle first, right? And for that, you need this sense of direction, like an inner compass. And when you're a speaker, then you're in the position to give people exactly that, this direction, this inner compass, to help them find their priorities, to help them find what they need, to show them options. And generally speaking, when you are planning a talk, when you're preparing for a talk, you prepare for like 20% content, only 20%, but 80% engagement. That's how important engagement is. Otherwise, people will just be overwhelmed by your content, and due to the lack of engagement, they won't really memorize any of it. And they definitely won't be inspired. The real content comes after the talk, when people have this sense of direction and know where they want to go first, what they want to tackle first. Then they go into your script and find more information there. And based on that, they can learn specific skills or acquire certain knowledge. And naturally, for this talk, you will also get a script. Now, let me jump back into the past. When I was in 6th grade, I stepped on stage for the very first time. And the moment I did so, I knew that I was screwed. Why is that? How did that happen? Well, a few weeks back, a few weeks before that, I had written a parody of a famous Christmas poem, and it was so well received in class that I was tasked by my teacher to recite that poem on stage on the Christmas party of the school in that year. And I was like pretty reluctant. So I asked a classmate of mine to help me out. and he would recite the first half and I would recite the second half. So they were on stage. He was going at it like a pro, just pumping out those lines, easy peasy Japanesey. And I, on the other hand, was super panicking because I couldn't, for the life of me, remember the first line of the second half. So where I was supposed to take over, there was a blank. I knew all the lines he was handing out there, but I couldn't remember my line. And we got closer and closer and closer to that moment where I was supposed to take over. And I couldn't remember it. I couldn't remember it. The panic rose, and then we were there. The moment was there. The moment arrived. And I got nothing. That was just silence. And my classmate was like, dude, it's your turn to take over. And I was like, do you know what the line is? Like the next line? And he was like, I have no idea. And the silence turned into laughter. People started laughing at me. I was so ashamed, embarrassed, and panicked and afraid. It was awful. And now I had like two choices here. The first choice would have been to give in to panic. And the other choice is the one that I made. I turned back and there was a teacher there, and I asked them for the line that I couldn't remember because I had a blackout. And I did get that line. And then I turned back to the audience and I recited the second half of the poem. Period. And my takeaway from that story is that no matter how bad it gets on stage, I can always salvage any kind of situation. This situation to this day gives me that confidence. So I was quite lucky actually to experience that. Now, what I described here is called stage fright. It's actually very common, and it's the difference between, just being excited or a bit anxious and like absolutely panicked, right? When you're like really panicked, that's like really really strong stage fright, what you got going there. Now, where there's stage fright, there's naturally ways to deal with it. What are these ways? The first thing I want to recommend is actually meditation. And that might raise an eyebrow on your side, but hear me out. I have tried out meditation many, many years ago, and I was like, I feel nothing. It doesn't work for me. And you might have experienced the same, or you might be thinking, it's just some magical stuff. I mean, that doesn't really exist, right? Like people are just imagining that. No, this is a proven scientific concept. It's actually scientifically researched that it works. And thanks to Dr. K, also known as Healthy Gamer GG, I found out that there are actually hundreds, if not thousands, of kinds of meditation. And if meditation doesn't work for you, that just means you haven't found the right technique for you. So check them out and find the right technique for you. And just to give you a sense of direction there, you remember, you're looking for grounding techniques, right? Meditation techniques that calm down your nervous system. So it's not in overdrive anymore, so that you can have a healthy level of tension and it doesn't overwhelm you, it doesn't control you, but you control it and it helps you to perform. That's where you want to be, like this sweet spot. That's what you want to hit. Second thing I can recommend is it's basically role playing or masquerading. How does it work? Well, you find a person who's really good at giving presentations, at giving speeches, talks. This might be someone at work or someone in your private life, or it might be a celebrity you know a lot about and you follow a lot, or it might be some imaginary person. It doesn't matter as long as you have a very clear image of them and you can imagine being them, because that's the point of this role play, right? So you step on stage, like even before you step on stage, you already start imagining you're that person. And there is research that this actually noticeably improves your performance. So basically, this is a technique that simplifies your inner world with two selves. The self that operates you in everyday life and the inner critic. And what this technique is aiming to do is to shut down the inner critic so that the operating self can do its work and perform at its best. And this role-playing technique is one very powerful way to do that. And it might not work for you. It has worked for me. So I can really still recommend you to try it out. You really, really should. You won't regret it. Even if it doesn't work for you, it's really fun. And then the third option. It's quite simple, really. Preparation, right? Because what makes us nervous a lot of time is actually this feeling of I haven't prepared enough. So why not deal with that? Well, what should we focus on during preparation? That's a good question. First of all, the equipment and the location. When it comes to the location, for example, there is like the dimensions, right? How large of a room will you be giving your talk in? If it's like really large, then it could be that even with a strong voice, you will not be able to reach people in the back row, right? Sitting in the back row, which would mean you would need some kind of mic as a support for your voice, right? And a sound system. That means you would need to check out, okay, will the people from the location provide it, or do I have to provide that equipment? Do we have a backup for that equipment? Because equipment can break, and in such a location that would be bad if it did break, because like I really, really need it, right? Otherwise people can't hear me. That would be bad. And what kind of mic is it? Is it like a headset? Is it a handheld microphone? Is it an attached microphone? Like, what is it? It's like you will handle that differently. Like, for example, if it's a handheld microphone, you gotta hold it the whole time, right? So that will block your hand and your gestures. We will talk about gestures in a lot more detail later, and then you will see that this is an actually really serious problem. Then there's lighting. You really gotta make sure that you have sufficient lighting on location. There will be people who tell you, turn off the lights. We'll be able to see the slides better. But actually, no one will be able to see your slides through a closed eyelid, because they will fall asleep when it's too dark. You want sufficient lighting. Trust me here. You want that. And when you're in the remote context, and you're using Microsoft Teams, for example, which is pretty common, then you should be aware that you actually have several options for sharing your screen. First of all, you can share with sound. That might be a necessity. And second of all, you have different modes of sharing at your disposal. And they can look quite fancy, and you can just play around with it to see what works best for your talk and try to get the best out of it, right? Just be aware that when you're making a recording of the way you're sharing and you're using like a special mode for that, a special sharing mode, that means that the recording will look differently compared to the live version. So I would recommend, in general, always recommend to try that out before you're giving the talk. Like any kind of equipment should be tested before the talk. Any kind of technology, trust me here. Right. So these are like some of the most important things you got to check out when it comes to equipment. Then there's point number 2, which is rehearsal. To me, that's a really important topic because I'm an actor. I've been an actor for about 20 years. And when you step on stage in a theater, then you actually have already rehearsed for like 99% of the time. And the actual performance on stage is like 1% of the time that you invest. Right? So it's just, basically you're just starting a program and it's being played and that's it. Right? That's the point you want to reach. And when you're giving a talk, I would recommend that you have at least 3 rehearsals to have some degree of repeatability, reproducibility. And the first rehearsal, at the very least, should definitely be recorded, at the very least as an audio recording, because that way you will be able to identify sections where you did really, really well, like really golden performance, where you really outdid yourself and you're surprised about yourself, what information came out of you, out of your mind. On the other hand, there will be sections where you're a little weak, like you're missing some knowledge here and you're like, okay, I got to do some research here. This is a problem. But I mean, it's fine, right? That's why you're doing the rehearsal. To notice these topics where you still need to do some research, and then you do some research and you go to the next iteration of your rehearsal. Point number 3, that would be the audience. To me, that's actually, in terms of preparation, pretty much the most important step. So you really want to invest in that. Why is that? As an actor, to give you a little bit of background, you're given, for example, one scene, and based on that scene, you're supposed to play a character. And just going off of that scene, you won't be able to create a real character here, right? That means you got to fill in the gaps or try to make assumptions based on the scene, right? Like it's gotta fit with the general setting of the scene or the scenes. Maybe it's a film or a stage play or whatever, right? So you got to give them some kind of biography. What is their education? How did they grow up? Where? How old are they? Are they currently living alone? Or do they maybe have a family? Or do they live with friends? Do they even have friends? What happens right before the scene? What happens right after the scene? What is their goal during the scene? All these kinds of questions need to be answered in order to create a believable character. And where I'm going with this is, for a speaker, the audience is the object of study here instead of the character for an actor, right? So you want to find out as much as possible about the audience in order to understand them better and understand their needs, because that's a common misconception that a speaker is supposed to think, okay, what do I want to convey here? That's not what a speaker is supposed to think. A speaker is supposed to always think, what does the audience need here? What do they need me to say here? So if you have to make any sort of decision, do I keep that slide or do I discard it? Ask yourself, what does the audience need? And if you have collected information about the audience, it will be easy to answer that question. And how you can specifically use this information is something we will now see in point number 4, which is visual and vocal image. And right now, you have no idea what visual and vocal image are, but you will in just a second. Weevil, wake up.
I didn't steal anything, I swear. I mean, what is it?
Please explain visual and vocal image to the audience.
You just got started and you're already delegating work to me. Young people just don't know what hard work is. At this rate, I can never retire. Your visual image is the visual representation or impression you create based on your appearance, body language, and presentation style. While your vocal image is the impression listeners form about you based on the qualities of your voice, such as pitch, tone, and volume. And as you can see and hear clearly, the two of us are complete opposites. This youngster doesn't hold a candle to me.
Yeah, right.
There. Happy?
Yeah, quite happy. Yeah. So, now you know. Visual and vocal image. And you will probably be able to imagine how you can adapt, change your visual and vocal image according to what you've found out about your audience. For example, if you have a really professionally driven and strict audience, it might be a good idea to have more formal wear if you're giving a talk for them, right? And you might be thinking, but my individuality, well, I recommend just getting an accessory or something that still expresses your individuality. Be creative, right? And when it comes to the vocal image, it's the same thing, basically. For example, if you have an audience that is from a completely different profession, so they are not in the IT profession at all, from our perspective, and if you then use all kinds of technical jargon, they won't understand anything. And that will break your engagement, which means people will start losing focus. They will start not paying attention anymore, right? And we don't want that. You don't want to break engagement. So, in that case, try to avoid technical jargon as much as possible. Now we've covered that, and we're going to move on to do's and don'ts. Well, there's a number of do's, and the first one that came to mind for me as an actor was actually posture. I see a lot of people, a lot of speakers who don't really have good posture, who don't really pay attention to that, who are standing there like really sluggish, or they're moving around all the time, or some stand like this. Because what I'm saying is, even if you're not talking, you should probably pay attention to your posture, right? You should still show presence, because if you show that you're not really fully in the moment, that will have an effect on the audience, even if you're not the one talking right now. And you should also have not just this this straight posture, but also basic tension. And that means you have a light tension throughout all of your body the whole time. And when someone were to push you from the side, for example, you would still keep standing firmly like a rock. That's how that works. And that has several effects. It will make your movements much more controlled. You could actually, or should actually, reach a point eventually after practicing enough. And yes, this is absolutely possible. I didn't want to believe it before my actor education either, but after a few weeks of training, it was second nature. You should have this program running in your head. What is my body doing? What is my body doing? What is my body doing? That's how controlled you want to be moving on stage. That allows you for reproducibility, and you will avoid things like, pacing or moving around senselessly and like having this nervous aura, right? You want to exude a calm energy. You want the audience to be calm and focused, which means you also have this energy. Calm, but focused, right? Because the audience will naturally connect to you. That's what we were going for. Right. So we have covered all of that. Another really powerful technique is eye contact. It's really, really, really important to do. Why is that? Well, first of all, it gives you this tool of getting feedback from your audience, right? So if you're maybe pointing at your slide, at the projection, and you're explaining something, by the way, don't turn your back on the audience completely. That breaks engagement. You're standing next to the projection and then you're pointing and explaining. And while you're doing that, you're always trying to engage with some people you've picked among the audience to see, okay, does this make sense? Like, do you understand what I'm talking about? Can you still follow what I'm saying here? And there's actually research. If you were to ask the people that you looked at after the talk what their engagement was between on a scale of 1 to 10, their results would be much higher. And not just for them, but also for the people sitting right around them. So that is really, really powerful. Keep that in mind. And eye contact is, to a limited degree, also possible in the remote context, right? You can look right into the camera, but it's not quite the same. But speaking of remote, what's important there is the spacing, right? Right now, I'm in a good spacing. You see quite a lot of my body, and you can see me gesturing, right? That's pretty important. And I'm not too close. Much, much more important. If I were to move a little bit closer, I would be coming into your private space. That would be right around here. I will show you that in a second. And if I were to go even closer, I would go round about here. That would be the intimate space. That is something you definitely don't want on camera or at all when interacting with strangers. Right? So private space and intimate space. See how creepy that is? I mean, private space is already... but intimate space really doesn't belong in any kind of talk or meeting. And I'm specifically also mentioning meetings here because you should also pay attention to that. Don't be too close to the camera. It's really uncomfortable. Even if people don't say it, they feel it. Okay? Please pay attention to that. Now, where there's do's, there's naturally also don'ts. So let's talk about that for a second. Common pitfalls. Reading the slides verbatim, overloading with text data, lack of structure, skipping out loud practice, speaking in a monotone, poor visual aids, ignoring time, not tailoring content. I hope that drives you crazy, because it sure drives me crazy. And that's all I'm going to say to this. You know what to take away from that, I know it. Speaking of takeaway, stories. Storytelling. This is the way to give your presentation or your talk your personal touch. And there is this famous framework for telling stories, which you might have heard about. It's called The Hero's Journey and consists of 17 parts. And as you might imagine, if you're using a framework for telling a story in a talk, a framework that has 17 parts to it, then by the time you're finished telling your story, your talk will probably be over. We don't want that. So, there must be a way to use a more compressed form of that, right? Yes. There are several frameworks derived from the hero's journey actually out there. And one of them is called CART by Philip Hum. And I really, really love that concept, because cart is also a word, and it creates this image that you're with your cart in the shopping center, and the shopping center is, instead of products, it's filled with parts of your story everywhere. And you're moving through the shopping center with your cart and just packing in the parts of your story that you need for this specific context, for this specific purpose, right? Now, how does this framework work? Well, CART is not just a word by itself, it's also an acronym, naturally. So each letter stands for another word. But before we get into that, obviously, before we tell a story, we have a hook. Remember that? I pretty much at the beginning of this talk told you this story about stepping on stage for the first time and how I already knew the moment I stepped on it that I was screwed. That was the hook. And then I moved on to the actual story. And it starts with C, giving context. Right? That was me telling you, right, I had written this parody of a famous Christmas poem, and so on and so on. And then came A. That was the adversity. That's the one where you really want to spend your time. You really want to relive the moment of adversity that you were facing. You want to relive it so that your audience can feel it and connect, engage, right? So that is the most important part, followed by the R, which is the resolution, right? So the adversity in my case was that I didn't know the first line of the second half that I was supposed to recite. And the resolution was that I turned to the back and asked for that line. They gave it to me, and I was able to recite the second half of the poem without any problems. And after that, came the T, which is the takeaway. And hold on now, you're not telling people what their takeaway is going to be. No, people can think for themselves. So you better leave that to them. You just tell people what your personal takeaway is. Okay? And that's pretty much it. That easy. And you might be thinking, but I don't have any stories to tell. Yes, you do. The thing is just we constantly forget about it. So I would recommend you, whenever you remember a story from the past, write it down. Whenever you experience something where you're like, oh my, that was something, write it down. Write that experience down, right? Keep some kind of journal for stories. And then at any given time, you can just go in that journal and be like, okay, what story am I going to choose for my talk? Right? You will have like hundreds of stories after a while. Trust me here. But there are other ways to give your talk your personal touch. And one of them is your interests, your hobbies, right? You're more than just your professional self. You have interests that go and skills that go way beyond that. So you might be knowledgeable in the field of magic, right? So you might be able to incorporate a magic trick that gives people this aha moment where they understand something, but at the same time this element of surprise and entertainment, right? If you do it right, you just got to do it right. Your creativity is the limit. If you're very interested in history, perfect. Notice that story is right in there, because history is full of stories. You just got to choose the right ones and tell them the right way. And we got a framework for that, so that's not a problem. And history is just full of wisdom, so why not use that? And like we all know, like most of us know about so many stories from the past, from history, right? So it's very relatable. Awesome. If you're in the field of acting, that would be me. You can use that as well. I mean, you've seen it. I've used it. I've interacted with my own original character, Weevil, right? This old guy. And I had him explain concepts that I could have explained too, but like this, it was much more entertaining, and it was like this element of surprise, right? And that's what you kind of want to reach with these techniques. This element of surprise where the audience goes, okay, what happened there? Like, okay, I gotta pay more attention here. Who knows what's going to happen next? This is becoming fun. I'm really into this now. This is great. I like it. Right? That's kind of the feeling that you're going for. And then we have experts on relaxation exercises, right? Because I told you before, you want your audience to be calm, relaxed, but focused. And when people are just starting to attend your talk, they will probably be stressed. Chances are, in today's world, they will be stressed. So if you can get people to take part in relaxation exercises together with you under your leadership, do it. If you're good at that, do it. Use it to your advantage. And also, if it's a longer talk, use it maybe after the first half or maybe after 2/3 to prepare them for the final third, right? Use it. Use everything you have at your disposal. And if you are giving your talk with a partner, you can use that as well, right? You don't have to be like, okay, I do part 1 and you do part 2. No, be creative. For example, what you can do is have a very short section of maybe 30 seconds where you finish each other's sentences. Like you talk a little bit faster and you finish each other's sentences, right? Element of surprise. No one will really expect that. And it has this nice entertaining effect. And you will still just normally carry on with your talk, right? And 30 seconds is not that hard to practice. How much investment is that really going to be? You're going to do fine. Trust me. And now we're going to talk about voice and body language. Those are pretty much the two most important skill fields that you can and should work on. I'm not going to go into much detail when it comes to the voice. You're going to get many more details in the script. But let me just talk about vocal volume here, because I believe that can be really crucial. Why is that? Because if a person in the back row can't hear you and you're not using a mic, and that is not really an option, doesn't really make sense on the location, or you just don't have it at your disposal, then you need enough vocal volume, right? And there will be people who are like, yeah, well, isn't that a genetic thing, right? If I don't have enough vocal volume, I'm born with that, right? Like, I can't change that. Yes, you can. You can change that. You can work on that. And there are even some ways to achieve quick results. One way is to bring yourself to subconsciously take deeper breaths. For example, by doing a bit of 3-step breathing before the talk. What is 3-step breathing? You first step, breathe into the belly. Second, you breathe into the chest. And last but not least, third, you breathe into the shoulders. Yes, you can breathe into the shoulders by raising them. That gives you about 5% more breath. So you do that, and that way you will feel, especially when you're breathing out, when you exhale, you will really feel that you have a much higher air volume in your lungs. And air is the fuel of your voice. And if you do that 3-step breathing, afterwards, automatically your breathing will be deeper, right? Less shallow compared to before for a while. That will have a lasting impact for a while, right? And if you have more air, more fuel for your voice, that means more vocal volume. Quite simple. And then we have another way, which is, I noticed I mentioned the areas, right? I mentioned the belly, I mentioned the chest, I mentioned the shoulders, and a lot of people have a lot of tension in their chest and shoulder area, and relaxing tension there with all kinds of techniques, do research with Google or AI, right? There's massages, there's yoga, there is Qigong, there's so many things. Do research, you will find your way that is fitting for you. If you relax tension there, that means your air intake will be better, your control will be better, and that means your vocal volume will expand. And that can be these things can be done pretty quickly, right? It's not a thing where you got to practice for a long time. And then there's more. There's a hack of sorts where you're not as... you don't really technically expand your vocal volume, but it will seem that way. What am I talking about? I'm talking about articulation. If you use clear articulation, someone sitting in the back row who can barely understand you under normal circumstances because of lack of vocal volume will be able to understand you much, much better if you use clear articulation, and will have some pretty cool, pretty nice effects too. One of them being that you will naturally slow down and have more time to think what you're actually going to say. And that in turn will lead to less filler words like you know. So that can be really useful. So we have covered deep breaths, we've covered relaxing tension, and we've covered the clear articulation. And when it comes to the long term, there are naturally also exercises that you can use to expand your vocal volume over time. And for that, I recommend this amazing guy called Darren McStay and his channel Improve Your Voice. Isn't that fitting? And there you will definitely find what you're looking for. No matter how you want to work on your voice, how you want to improve, you will find what you're looking for on his channel. Pretty damn sure. Darren McStay is a singer, he's an actor, he's a voice actor. He has so much experience. He's been a creator for many years, and he really knows what he's doing. Check him out. And now we're moving on to the most important part and the last part of this talk, which is body language. And as you can see, we have this guy here on his knees, looking down on his hands like he's having an existential crisis, and he's asking himself, what do I do with my hands? God, why did you punish me with this? What do I do with my hands? Well, then life gives you hands. Make lemonade. No? Not convinced? Okay. Original answer then. When it comes to hands, as an actor, the obvious answer to what do I do with my hands is requisites, right? If you have to busy yourself as an actor, you always interact with objects, and these objects are called requisites. What could that be for a speaker? It's actually not that hard. It can be a microphone, right? Maybe you're holding a microphone. It can be a laser pointer or a stick to point at something. Or it can be objects that you use somewhere in the middle of your presentation to explain certain concepts, right? Instead of describing something and creating an image in people's minds, in the audience's minds, that way, like virtually, you're actually interacting with the object that you're trying to create an image of, right? You're just using the object outright. And that way you can really easily explain all kinds of concepts. And then there is cards. And I personally believe in the heart of the cards. Extra points if you know that reference. I'm kidding. But yeah, cards, really, really useful. I would just recommend you to use smaller cards so that you're not tempted to write too much on it. And I would recommend you to write the cards as early as possible in your rehearsal process so that you get used to them, and so that you get to a point through the rehearsals where you don't really need the cards anymore, right? Because like 90% of your presentation should be completely free, but it should still be somewhat reproducible, right? If you attended the same talk 2 times, then there should be some, some sections where it's a little bit different, where you're like, oh, cool, I didn't know that yet. He didn't tell me about that, or she didn't tell me about that yesterday. But today, cool. Yeah, that's a nice addition here. I like it. But overall, like the general structure and like 80%, 90% of the content should be the same, right? That's the point you want to reach. And that means, most of all, you might have your cards in your pocket, or you have them laid on the table. And then you might be thinking, okay, hold on. If I don't use them for a long time, let's say I start my talk and then right in the middle of the talk, I like lose my focus and I don't really know what I was going to talk about and I need my cards. That would mean that I have to take my cards then, pick them up, and stand there in silence and be like, okay, it's not that card, it's not that card, no, okay, it's this one, right? No, you don't have to do that. Again, your creativity is the limit. You use that to your advantage, of course, right? You're going to do a recap. You're going to be like, okay, so first of all, I asked you this series of questions, right? And then I explained to you why this talk is titled Speak to Inspire. Then we dove into stage fright, starting with the story and talking about remedies. Then we talked a lot about preparation and do's and don'ts of giving speeches or talks, and about the personal touch with storytelling and interests. And then we talked about the vocal volume. And right now, we're talking about what we're going to do with our hands when we're giving a talk, right? So there you go. It's pretty simple, and really, it doesn't just help you, it also helps the audience. Remember, audience's needs. That's always your main directive. Now, requisites are great, but I already told you that you should get to a point where you don't really need your cards a lot if you're going to use cards. And the same goes for all the other requisites. Most of the time you want your hands to be freed up because gestures, right? Gestures is the most important thing. And you will understand why. Because that's what we're going to talk about last. Gestures. There's this amazing woman. Her name is Vanessa Van Edwards, and she is a body language expert. And she and her team analyzed the most viral TED Talks and compared them to the least viral TED Talks. And they looked for patterns. And one very, very clear pattern that emerged was the most viral TED Talks had double the amount of gestures per minute compared to the least viral ones. Double the amount of gestures per minute. That's how important gestures are. And there's more. They also found through brain scans that the brain is actually 12.5 times more likely to believe body language, to believe gestures over the spoken word. 12.5 times more likely to believe gestures over the spoken word. Imagine that. And it makes sense because our ancestors did not have the luxury of the spoken word. So they mostly communicated with body language. They had to be good at it. Their survival depended on it. And that means it doesn't make sense for us to believe ourselves to be bad at body language. That doesn't exist. You can't be untalented in body language because it's literally in your blood. All of us wouldn't be alive today. We wouldn't be here if our ancestors had been bad at communication via body language. It's just a skill that you got to train. That's all. And you might be a little faster or a little bit slower, but you definitely have talent. And it's called body language for a reason. Every language has vocabulary and you can expand it. How do you do that for body language, you may ask? Great question. What you can do is find 3 to 5 people who you resonate with. Obviously speakers. 3 to 5 speakers who you resonate with. Not people you look up to, right? It's not people you put on a pedestal and be like, oh, they're so amazing. I'm never going to reach those heights. Oh, they're so great. No. You are looking for people where you're like, I want to be able to do that too. I want to be like them. That's the kind of people you're looking for. then you go ahead and you copy their style, first of all. Just copy it without modifying it. Copy it to the best of your ability. And not an hour at a time, like a few minutes maybe at a time, and try to do it very, very regularly. And once you're comfortable with this body language that you've added from them, these gestures that you've copied from them, then ask yourself, does it feel comfortable for me? Does it feel right? And maybe even record it and look at it and be like, does this look right? Does this fit me? If the answer is no, discard it. If the answer is yes, keep using it. Then it's part of your style. And it just fits your body naturally. Right? We all have different bodies. That's why we all need a unique style for our body language. And that actually brings me to this point where you might know someone, it might be a colleague, who, from your perspective, might have some, potential for growth in the communication department. Maybe they are not heard as much in the team. Maybe they can't really deliver their concepts, explain them very well. Maybe they're a little bit shy from your perspective. And you're tempted to tell them, why don't you just speak up already? Try to be a little bit more dominant. Try to express yourself more. Try to take part more. I mean, you're so smart. Why do you hold back? What's going on here? Don't do that. That's just putting pressure on them. What you want to do is refer them to someone in the field who's an expert when it comes to communication, when it comes to body language and all of that kind of stuff. Because, just like I showed you just now, everyone has their own style, and you won't help them with any kind of general advice, but instead they need to refer to someone who can help them find their own style and find their priorities. Like, what do I need to work on first? Only that person can decide that. No one else can decide that for them, right? So that's all I'm asking. Refer them to someone, to an expert. And with that, I have reached the end of this talk almost. We have spoken about a lot of things. I just did a recap, so it's all still pretty fresh. And you have not just what I talked about in this speech, in this presentation, but also, as I told you, the script. You will get the script afterwards. So I want you to now find what you want to improve on. I want you to find your own style and to fulfill your own potential. And you're able to with what I've given you. So let me end on this. The world needs more inspiring speakers. Are you going to be one of them?